Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weekly Notice with Andy Ngo. Thank you for joining me tonight. As always, please leave me questions and comments as we get through the episode. Uh, if you've been joining prior weeks, you'll notice that I'm back in the usual spot. In the last 2 weeks, I was traveling, as you can probably guess. Um, and unfortunately, my detractors through Antifa were also watching. In fact, they were trying to look at the room, I should say, and see if they could find clues on the walls, any writing from the hotel, for example, that might reveal where I was at. I'm going to show you that um, just so you can see that, unfortunately, there are those who seek to harm me so much that they are so zealous in it that they'll take actions like that. Here we go. So this is from an Antifa member in Portland, and they are. So I'm reading this. Um, there's a typo in the beginning. Damn, Andy Ngo's live stream that just happened on Get Her. He's in a hotel somewhere with some signage on the back door behind him. If anyone is skilled with that kind of stuff, maybe you can make out which hotel. Really scary. And another post around the same time from an Antifa member in Portland. Portland will celebrate when that piece of shit, Andy Ngo, is finally dead. So, yeah, they've just been inciting violence at me for years now. Unfortunately, that's what comes with doing this work. When you cover violent extremists, they will go after you. Where civil society should step in is that the journalist organizations should have and should be much more defensive of people like myself and others who are threatened with violence, are victims of violence, but the silent. Law enforcement departments should do more. Anyways, I am glad to be back in the normal spot, and I have a good episode lined up for you this week. There's a lot of Antifa related news. Although I guess maybe the better question is, when is there not? Because they are so active in their organizing. So this is from a report that I edited. It's from a great new contributing reporter for the Post Millennial named Ava Knott. She's based out of San Diego. I highly recommend you follow her on social media if you don't already. She's had a long track record of writing for publications in San Diego on the subject of crime. And she and I recently co-wrote the piece 2 weeks ago about the secret grand jury indictment of the 11 Antifa suspects, 11 member suspects, I should say, accused of carrying out a really brutal attack on people who were at Pacific Beach at the beginning of January 2021. They brought weapons with them like a bat, projectiles, pepper spray. As always, what we see in these videos is, and this is a screenshot from the direct action, they're carrying their banners and their logos and their signage to make it very clear who they are. But you and I have and continue to hear that Antifa doesn't exist, that it's a made-up figment of the right-wing imagination. And you don't have to look very far to see the evidence of the contrary. So the new update in the report from Ava Knott is that one of the defendants who was indicted by the secret grand jury but wasn't at the prior court hearing where all the other suspects were there. This individual, Joseph Austin Gaskins, made a appearance in court last week. And I'm going to pull up the article in the Post Millennial. Defendant in San Diego Antifa riot case had allegedly beat a cop on the head 4 months prior. So he has pending felonies from the recent indictment regarding the Antifa beach riot, but he also has another case where he allegedly beat a police officer in San Diego on the head at another violent BLM direct action just 4 months prior. If you're probably wondering why is the photograph of him in court censored, and that's actually was because the judge has set a rule or an order that the press cannot publish photographs or video, any images of the suspects from the courtroom. So that's the reason for that. I don't understand the reasoning. That's pretty uncommon. Usually, when somebody's been publicly charged, listed in the criminal complaints and all that, there's usually not attempts to hide their identity by prosecutors at that point. But there may be reasons here that I don't understand, and certainly, as responsible journalists, what we do is we don't interfere with the legal court process. But in my report that I co-wrote with Ava a couple of weeks ago, we were able to alternatively find photographs of the suspects from open sources. So these are some of the other suspects, by the way. Anyways, so this is on the Post Millennial. It's by Ava Knott. I'm just going to skim through a little bit of it. Alleged Antifa rioter Joseph Austin Gaskins, then 19, was arrested almost 2 years ago during a violent left-wing protest in downtown San Diego, California, on August 24, 2020. Local news media reported that the number of protesters grew to about 100 before they dispersed around 11 p.m. that night. Some of the protesters held signs in support of BLM, and the crowd gathered to protest the shooting of Jacob Blake the previous day by police in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Blake, who was wanted for rape and domestic abuse, fought police officers and attempted to reach inside a car when he was shot. He survived. 2 nights later, 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse famously shot 3 rioters in self-defense during rioting in Kenosha. A jury acquitted Rittenhouse of all charges more than a year later. About 6 p.m. that August evening in San Diego, police officers responded to a call for mobile force activation at San Diego Police Department headquarters because protesters were blocking driveways, both the entrance and exit gateways for patrol cars and emergency vehicles. I'm just going to stop reading there for just a second and state that the blocking of entrances and exits of buildings is a big deal, because often what we've seen at these violent BLM Antifa riots is that's a precursor for them setting the buildings on fire. Over and over in Portland, for example, in 2020 and into early 2021, what they would do is they would target, let's say, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement building by putting barricades against the doors and then setting it on fire. They did that to police, multiple police stations in Portland. They did that to the police union hall as well. So it's a big deal. And I'm continuing reading. At a hearing a year later, San Diego police officer Robert Bustamante told the judge that he saw protesters crowding close to police vehicles. And then he goes on and says, a man with a metal pole rushed him from behind. And this is a quote. He was holding it in his right hand in upright motion, Bustamante told the judge. He began to strike me from behind with the red pole and began to hit me in the back of my head and neck. And so he testified about being beaten allegedly by Antifa suspect Joseph Austin Gaskins. He talked about his injuries. He suffered a concussion, the officer. So yeah, that's just background on one of the 11 Antifa suspects in San Diego. This is a very big developing story. Continue to keep an eye on my reporting and the Post Millennial, because we're following this case really closely. What's significant is that the Antifa suspects here have been charged with felony conspiracy, which I don't think has been used anywhere successfully against um, alleged Antifa members who have conspired and planned out violence. So it's a big case out of Southern California, of all places. Um, There is currently, actually, I'm not sure if it ended yet, but there's been this show hearing, I should say, in Washington, D.C. regarding the 6th of January. A former daytime television producer was brought in to produce this hearing. I'm referring to the 6th of January um, hearing. They're bringing all these witnesses, and it's just being blasted on television. And I'm withholding judgment on this. Um, I think the public deserves a serious public inquiry on what happened on the 6th of January 2021, but we also deserve a public inquiry on what happened through 6 months of violent riots across the United States in 2020, and that's something we never got. To this day, we still don't really understand where a lot of this money came from. Through my reporting, I've been able to identify the vehicles for where the cash is crowdfunded and transferred through Cash App and Venmo and GoFundMe and some of these so-called charity groups, but we don't know who are some of the big financial backers behind that. For example, the public doesn't really still understand the nature of the violence that happened night after night in Portland, and the lack of prosecution for those who carried out the violence and was arrested. Um, Here's a story about alleged left-wing violence that you probably didn't hear. So on the 16th of June, last week, there was a car ramming attack on a Trump merchandise store in Massachusetts. See, the town is Easton, Massachusetts. I'm just going to show you the video. The employee who was working in there at the time was lucky to be alive, because the force of the vehicle and the speed going through that shop would have killed potentially multiple people. Here's the video. I'm gonna play it one more time just in. Very lucky man there. So the significance of that story is I looked into the background of the driver who was arrested, and what I found, I guess, not surprising, which is probably why you didn't really hear much about the story. Here from my Twitter. So the suspect who was arrested at that car accident, let's just say, it's to be determined if it was an intentional attack, in Massachusetts on the Trump's merchandise store. The suspect's name is Sean Flaherty. He's from Raynham, Massachusetts. This is his photograph. I looked at his tattoos. There is an anarchist symbol on his left elbow area here, but it's also the symbol for the band Ministry, which created music in the 80s. Some older people who are watching now may have heard of this band. I call them an Antifa band because they've made, particularly in recent years, songs in support of either Antifa or their message. This is one such example. They had a song like a single actually called Antifa. Um, yeah, so um, potentially a case of left wing violence that just happened, and unfortunately, that's not all. There is a development in what is probably the final development in this case, but in let's see. I'm just pulling up the file. Okay. So in 2020, a lot of rioters came to Portland from out of town. Unsurprisingly, they crossed state lines. Um, Infamous words we kept hearing because of the Kyle Rittenhouse case. But we had lots of people crossing multiple state lines to go to Portland to riot because it was ongoing for so long. The rioters were being let out with impunity. One of the really shocking cases where somebody was arrested was of a violent criminal named Malik Muhammad. He came from, that's his photo there on the left. He came all the way from Indianapolis, Indiana, to Portland, and he was arrested after throwing firebombs at police to try to kill him. This is what he actually pleaded guilty to. So he had two running simultaneous cases. Charged both at the state level and the federal level, and they were the cases were being prosecuted at the same time. So he's accused of he's not accused, he was convicted of, he pleaded guilty. He made homemade explosive devices and threw them at law enforcement. One officer, the group of officers dodged, but one did catch fire. He also bought bats and were handing them out to his comrades. This is in this picture here. So this is from my Patreon. That's him after he lit the firebomb and threw it. And you can just see here the picture of the explosion. The officers are all around it. They dodged, fortunately, except for one did. His leg caught fire, but the fire was put out quickly. So earlier this year, in March, Malik Muhammad was at the state level. He pleaded guilty to attempted murder and all these other felonies, and he was given 10 years in a sweetheart deal. Part of that pleading guilty also meant that in terms of his federal sentencing, because he was being prosecuted at the federal level for possessing bombs. As part of that sweetheart deal, once he pleaded guilty up to the federal charges, 2 counts of possessing destructive device, he wouldn't face any additional jail time on top of what was already part of the sentencing for the state. So he was given 10 years. But what has kind of just been formalized is that he's also been sentenced now at the federal level. Again, no additional time in prison, but the case is now done. He pleaded guilty to both federal and state charges. This is a picture of him and his girlfriend, Kristen McGuire. She went with him to Portland, and she's in some of the surveillance footage at the store with him when he was buying weapons. She was not prosecuted, by the way. Malik Muhammad's bail at the state level was originally set at $2.1 million. Yeah. And guess what? Antifa in Portland, through these online campaigns that I keep talking about, actually raised 10% of his bail, $210,000 cash. they raised to get him out. They really wanted him out for reasons we still don't know. He was let out, and then he was rearrested on the federal charges, and the judge denied him bail in that case. So he was held in, this was last year, he was held in prison from then until now, and now he's serving out this 10-year sentence. So there are all these campaigns by Antifa. They did this, events in his honor. And so, yeah, this is what I point to help raise money for Malik. So they're still raising money for him, so you can send money to him at his jail so he can buy stuff. Yeah, I mean, Antifa support killers and murderers. That's part of their MO. I'll play you the video of one of his fire bombings. Here we go. Yeah. So what's also perhaps unsurprising is that just a few months before he went to Portland to carry out that violence, he had a private special meeting with the Republican governor of Indiana. Malik Muhammad was part of BLM protests in Indianapolis, where he's from. And as we saw over and over, governments reached out to really radical, extreme people. This is a photo of Malik Muhammad and Indiana Governor Holcomb. Yeah, this was just shortly before he went to Portland. I'm going to read a little bit from the charging document. Let's see, is it here? This is him and his girlfriend. One moment. I'm going to pull up the DOJ release for you. Here we go. So this was a press release that just came out a couple of days ago from the DOJ, announcing that he was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Again, this is the 10 years is for both the federal and the state convictions on the multiple violent felonies. So they outline all the dates of his violence. Let's see. September 21st, 2020, large demonstration outside the sheriff's office. Observed an individual light on fire and throw an object toward the building. One officer observed the burning object flying through the air towards the vehicle, landing approximately 15 feet from a police sound truck. Officers recovered the unexploded device. Yeah, so one of his bombs that he threw didn't go off, fortunately, but he threw it very close to a vehicle, a police vehicle. On another day, protesters set fire to and broke windows of the Multnomah County Justice Center. And then on October 11, 2020, 250 people heavily vandalized various buildings and parks, including Oregon Historical Society, that's a museum, Portland State University, Bank of America, Starbucks. Police officers observed Malik Muhammad using metal baton to smash the windows of several buildings and arrested him after a short chase. So he tried to escape, by the way. Muhammad possessed a loaded handgun magazine in his pocket. A loaded handgun matching the magazine found on Muhammad was found discarded near the location of his arrest. So he had a pistol on him, and he tried to discard the evidence. There are other dates here that outline what he did, by the way. He was also arrested with a cache of weapons. So he had a shotgun, 2 semi-automatic rifles, pistol, lots of ammunition, and various bomb components. That was all seized by the investigators. And then here's also what's interesting, by the way. Really important. Mohammed's trip to Portland does not appear to be an isolated event, and this is from the DOJ press release. Investigators obtained evidence that he traveled to Louisville, Kentucky in August 2020 to meet with anti-government and anti-authority violent extremist groups to conduct firearms and tactical training. Investigators also obtained several public social media posts by Mohammed promoting violence towards law enforcement in other cities, including Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Chicago. So this was really a national conspiracy here that he was involved with. Unfortunately, that's all that's listed in the DOJ about this training camp in Louisville, Kentucky. That's all that we know. It doesn't surprise me that Louisville was where he went to. That's in terms of the South. That's like one of the hotspots of militant left-wing nationalism, particularly around Black identity extremism. Earlier this year, there was a BLM leader and a former editor for paper in Louisville that allegedly carried out an attempted assassination on a Jewish mayoral candidate. And he bailed out, by the way. He fired allegedly rounds at the candidate and missed just barely. And his social media before it was taken down was just filled with all this BLM, Black nationalists, and pro-Antifa stuff. Okay. Yeah, and for those who are just joining or joined late, please leave questions and comments. I'll get to them towards the end. And speaking of Louisville, by the way, Louisville has Democrats in governance, even though the state of Kentucky is conservative. The city of Louisville is liberal. There's a university there. There's a lot of BLM militancy. Let's see. There was the mayor there had been punched in last weekend when he went to a Juneteenth celebration event, and the person who's doing it on the video is a Black man with dreadlocks. I'm just going to play the video, the surveillance video, so you can see. Okay. There's no sound. So yeah, just here it's okay. What punch right there? That was the mayor punched to the ground in one hit, sucker punch, and the suspect just went away. So police released this because nobody stopped. You can see all those people there. Nobody stopped them. They just, yeah, they didn't even respond. Suspect was apprehended, by the way. Oh wait, sorry, I just realized I didn't even play the video. My apologies. Here we go. That's the punch. So this is in Louisville, and that was the Democrat mayor, Greg Fisher, getting sucker punched to the ground. And this is the suspect, Antoine Brown. He was arrested days after the attack. Yeah. People who are concerned about left-wing violent extremism should pay attention to Louisville, because a lot of it happens there. Okay. So this is an investigation that I followed up on that was actually first broken by Antifa Watch. Follow them on Twitter if you don't already. They do really good work with crime reporting. Okay. So there is a self-described anti-fascist activist who's based in Minnesota named Lucas Allen Dietsche. This is from his LinkedIn account. His pronouns are him, he, and comrade. He runs this publication that calls for the abolishing of prisons and law enforcement. And it was discovered and first reported out by Antifa Watch that he is a convicted child sex offender. And so I went up and looked up in the state of Wisconsin here, and you can see this is his registration and a mugshot of him from 2018. So he spent over 2 years in prison for the conviction, and now is a left-wing Antifa communist activist in the city of, was it Mankato, Minnesota, which I think is in the south of the state. It's him from his Instagram, the BLM Communist Fist, him posing with the communist flag. Alan Dietsch's mugshot, more of the BLM Fist. So he leads this group called the John Brown Brigade. A lot of these Antifa groups will have the name John Brown in it. John Brown was a abolitionist, as anti-slavery abolitionist, and he killed slave owners and set fires to plantations. So he's viewed as a historical hero figure for self-described anti-racist and anti-fascists who think that they're doing, great things like that. Yeah, so this is a group that Alan Dietscha is a part of, the John Brown Brigade of Mankato. And so you see in their picture, no fascism. And this is how they describe themselves: people against heteroimperialism, trans, homophobia, racism, sexism. And they had recently just shared an event about a children's story hour. I wonder if people know that one of the leaders for this group had been convicted for child sex crimes. Yep, he wants police defunded. Many of the people who are militant far left want law enforcement defunded, I think, because they desire to carry out crimes. And many of them are actually very explicit and open about that. Antifa in Portland, for example, one of their mottos is "Be gay, do crimes," and they call for police to be killed and abolished because they want to be the one to terrorize the public with true impunity. Okay, again, if you are joining late or just joining, please leave me questions and comments. Unfortunately, that isn't the only child sex crime related story that I'm covering today. So this is Alden Bunag. He is a teacher in Oahu, Hawaii, and he was very, very active on social media, on Twitter. This is from one of his tweets just from April of this year. You're acting like we refer, and he's a left-wing activist, like we want to show kids porn or something. But something I've learned through the years is that whenever right-wingers accuse others of something, it's definitely because they're projecting. Well, Alden was arrested on June 15th following a federal investigation. This is my Subscribe star, by the way. If you want to support my journalism, join me on Subscribe Star. I'm also on Patreon or Locals. Yeah, so a federal investigation found that he allegedly distributed sex abuse content of minors. with another school teacher in Philadelphia. The criminal complaint doesn't name who that other teacher is. It's just the initials of AW. The and this is from Alden's Twitter, by the way. And that's a picture from one of his social media. Yeah, so socialist high school teacher. This photo of him. Look at this tweet that he wrote December of last year. Trying to tear down gender roles and subtly instill socialist values into my high schoolers and elementary kids. Yeah, so he got into like these Twitter spats with, I guess, conservative people, and was always accusing right wingers of being pedophiles. Yeah, and now he's been arrested and charged for allegedly distributing child porn. And I have screenshots from the criminal complaint. If you go on my Subscribe Star on my Patreon, you can actually see the PDF file, the criminal complaint, and read the whole thing for yourself. It is very graphic. I'm going to read just a little from it, but I'm giving a content warning, by the way. Okay, so this is the allegation from a federal investigator against this socialist teacher in Hawaii. Bunag sent a 44-second video of a nude minor boy laying down on his back. And this is graphic content warning. There's an adult male performing anal sex on the boy. During the video, the adult male occasionally... Sorry, this is too graphic. I'm not going to continue reading because it describes sexual abuse of a minor in graphic detail. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to read exactly from this. But okay, this is important. I'm just going to read this. It sounds like the boy is wincing in pain and the adult is speaking to him in a language other than English. It also says that the adult covered the boy's mouth. So very graphic allegations in the federal criminal complaint against this teacher in Hawaii, and you can read my reporting on it on my Subscribe Star Locals and Patreon. Yeah. Whew. Okay. It's not just in the US that there's been violence by Antifa. They are also active in other Western countries. It's always Western countries because Western countries give them the liberty to organize, and they exploit rights to harass, intimidate, and carry out violence against their targets. So last weekend in Bristol, England, which is in the southwest of the country, it's a very left-wing area of England, probably the most left-wing in all the UK. I've written about them before. I call it the Portland of England. Bristol is also where there's a university. It's where there was the only statue in all of the UK that was toppled during 2020, inspired by George Floyd. There was a statue of a historical slave trader and philanthropist that they took attached rope to and pulled down and then dumped the statue into the harbor. There was a criminal trial against 4 people who admitted to doing it, by the way, but the jury acquitted them of a crime. That was earlier this year. But yeah, so that's the context for Bristol. In the UK, women's rights groups and activists are really vocal about pushing back against radical trans ideology in a way that you don't see women's rights activists in the US do, really. In the UK, you have people like the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling and others being very vocally critical of, let's say, male to female trans people using private women's spaces like locker rooms, toilets, engaging in sports but competing as women. That's a very active debate in the UK, and one of the women that's leading that that activism, her name's Kelly J. Keane. She went on Tucker Carlson a few months ago. You might remember she's the one that she went to America for a bit and went to that swimming competition, I think in Georgia, where the male to female trans swimmer was competing. And there was a video of her that went viral where somebody in the audience disagreed with her, and they couldn't agree, or that person couldn't define what a woman was, and he was saying that he wasn't an expert, wasn't a biologist. This is what one of the justices infamously said at one of the hearings. She said, "I'm not a biologist," when she was asked what a woman is. And Kelly Jean Kay in the viral video said, "Well, I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is." So anyways, so she organized a women's rights event in Bristol, which is like going to the belly of the beast. And well, Antifa showed up there, as they did in Manchester recently, when she did an event in Manchester. And they were trying to intimidate the women, and they tried to shut down the event. In this video I'm going to play, you can see them. They took some of the signs from the women and ripped them up. This is what Antifa did.
You're gonna die out. You're gonna die out. You're gonna die out. You are ancient history. You are fossils. You are dinosaurs. You are failed.
So a lot of the women rights activists, when they look at this, what they see are aggressive men who are essentially threatening them. I mean, this Antifa person in black bloc kept shouting, "You're going to die out, you're going to die out," and he's being held back by police. There were a lot of police there. I'm confident that if there weren't that line of police keeping the militant left-wingers away, they would have carried out violence against this woman. Afterwards, and by the way, I know it was an Antifa event because of who promoted the event and who went to it, in addition to the tactics I can recognize. So yeah, they showed up in the area, and this is the Anti-Homophobe Action UK, which is an Antifa group in England. And they posted these stickers all around anti-fascist area in the park area where the women were speaking. These were the flyers that they put out, digital flyers, I should say. Here are some pictures of the Antifa members. You can see the black bloc. You can see the logos, the black and red flag, and another big giveaway. I analyzed the video that we just watched. You can see one of them has a tattoo on the hand of the Antifa Ein front symbol. That's the 3 arrows, and it's easy to miss. And observers also noted that one of the Antifa members, when he was harassing the women and ripping up the signs, that he had an erection. Some of the women feel like that these men have get sexually excited over being abusive to women. One of the Antifa members who followed the woman after the event to a pub. This person, he's been unmasked. He's a Bristol Antifa militant. This is his photo from his Twitter. Antifa militant in Bristol. And he changed her handle, but you can see he posted that he was going to be there anyways. And Posey Parker, that's the name that Kelly J. Keane used to use. So he posted out where exactly she was in the pubs, Slug and Lettuce. There, he was telling comrades to bombard the pub with phone calls to get them kicked out, so that these people, in my view, could then have a chance to physically confront the women when they were kicked out. The women, fortunately, were able to flee through a different door, by the way, so they weren't injured. And back to the United States, Jane's Revenge, the Antifa-affiliated militant pro-abortion group, has carried out more attacks. I've been documenting it now for weeks. Some that I've added to my big growing thread on Twitter. The one happened in Iowa, Des Moines, earlier this month. This happened actually a few weeks ago. But Jane's Revenge issued a claim of responsibility through another group. So yeah, they either use these Antifa blogs or Antifa accounts where they post their statements. I'm going to read from it because you should see how far left domestic terrorists speak. The night of June 2nd, 2022, we vandalized Agape, a prominent crisis pregnancy center in a low-income area of Des Moines, Iowa. Agape, like Innovision's Birthright and many other crisis pregnancy centers in Iowa, is a religious faith clinic that inflicts emotional, financial, and physical violence on people who need healthcare and support. It's interesting that they call centers that provide like diapers and baby food formula. By the way, there was a shortage, remember, of baby food formula. These pregnancy resource centers provided food for infants. They call that violence. Going back to quoting the statement from Jane's Revenge, they lie to shame and manipulate people into not getting abortions. Crisis pregnancy centers work to uphold patriarchy, Christian supremacy, white supremacy, and cis heteronormativity. We broke windows and wrote messages of God loves abortion, fake clinic, this place is not safe, and stop lying. It was fun and easy. Now is the time for action. Crisis pregnancy centers, as well as the churches, banks, and businesses that support them, are all responsible for the violence of forced birth. We are not asking for the right to choose. Abortions are not safe, and neither are you. So there you go. Another time, this is in Philadelphia. This is around the 11th of June. Hope Pregnancy Center, they had their windows smashed up. A different Antifa-affiliated group put a claim of responsibility on a blog. Look at that picture, by the way. This group calls itself the what do they call it? The Anti-Hope Brigade. And they say here that they will broaden their attacks and that they're inspired by the actions of comrades in Wisconsin, Colorado, New York, and growing list of places. Okay. Give me just a moment to read over your questions and comments. There's still time to send them in right now. Michael Wells Selenium asks, how similar is this Antifa group to the Weather Underground terrorists from the 1960s? I've talked about this subject a lot, or the Weather Underground a lot. The Weather Underground were a group of revolutionary communist American terrorists who carried out a number of bombings, attempted bombings. They killed people. They broke into jails to get their prisons to get their comrades out. They did bank robberies to finance their criminal activities, and they were active in the 60s and 70s. The group was completely dismantled by the FBI and federal prosecutors because one by one their members were arrested and prosecuted, and many of them spent many years in prison for their role in deadly terrorist attacks. The Antifa today are directly inspired by that type of militancy from the past, and in fact, it's very similar in that it's made up of Antifa made up of a lot of educated middle class people, in addition to, of course, those who are really vulnerable and homeless. That's, I guess, one way that it is different than the Weather Underground of the past. But whether the communist ideology, anarchist ideology, or a combination of the two, that requires reading and usually like some type of academic background where you introduce to these theories. Because if you read the texts of these anarchist and communist philosophers, they're not really easy to understand. They were written a long time ago, and so it requires somebody who's familiar with that philosophy and ideology to like rewrite it and reword it in a way that the militants today can understand. How they're different, how Antifa is different from the Weather Underground is that, like Jane's Revenge, Antifa groups, and these other militant far left groups, is that they don't organize themselves really in the same tight knit member organization. You have some cells of Antifa that are like that. Rose City Antifa is one. The Torch Antifa network has cells in different places where there is a membership process. But by and large, it's about people who pledge allegiance informally to the ideology and carry out, either individually or with a small group of people, some type of criminal action. And so if you read these statements that are by Jane's Revenge, for example, they're calling for those type of attacks. And that's intentional because it makes it harder to bring like RICO charges, conspiracy charges. But, I think prosecutors kind of need to rethink if the current conspiracy charges that are on the books is applicable to the context today, where there obviously is a conspiracy, but they're not being charged in that way because somebody is not a card-carrying member of Antifa or some other group, but is in every other way has pledged allegiance to it, much in the same way that jihadists who have never been to Iraq or Syria will pledge allegiance to the caliph of ISIS and will carry out terrorist attacks, as has happened a lot in Western Europe and in the US. Porky Logan 59 asks, Andy, what is one legitimate criticism of your work? That's a really good question. A sign of a journalist is he or she needs to be introspective and needs to take in criticism and needs to acknowledge and apologize when he or she gets things wrong. Let's see, one broader criticism. There are lots of criticisms of me that are legitimate. I stand by my work, but I'm not a perfect professional. I wish that for example, I hate it when I even get a typo or spelling errors in my writings. Like that's because then it's wrong, right? So from the smallest things, that's upsetting to me. And then of course there's some things factually incorrect, if I get the wrong date, for example, or I misspell somebody's name, or say the wrong city. Sometimes that happens with breaking news. I'm in a rush to get information out and I get one key piece wrong. But I think, let's say, a legitimate criticism of my work, let's say not on an individual type error, but on a larger thing. One criticism that I got a lot that it's partially legitimate, but I think it's unfair, is that a lot of the videos that I post now have been taken by other videographers. And so I'm criticized for not being on the ground and capturing the videos of the protests and riots myself. Um, but it's not because I don't want to be there. It's because I really can't, because of the death threats against me by Antifa and the actions that they take to search for me. When I was on the ground in 2020, every day I was really lucky. I was lucky that they didn't find me and kill me. And in 2021, when I returned on the ground, not to get video, just to observe as a journalist, that was when um, they interrogated me and pulled off my mask and beat me severely, and chased me through the streets of downtown Portland. And I had to seek refuge in a hotel. You've probably seen that footage. Um, yeah, so the criticism that I get, that why aren't you out there getting your own videos anymore? Well, that's a legitimate criticism, but it's not just me. Anybody who does this line of work, if you once you just start getting recognized by the far left, you can't do it anymore. Just think of the few people who did it a lot in the last 5 years. Very few of them, I struggle to think, can do it more than a year. Particularly if your work is effective. Because what Antifa do is they specifically target video journalists and photographers, even though it's entirely the journalist's right to be there in public to document these activities. Antifa will carry out violence against them or threaten them or rob them or break their equipment, and they'll do it with impunity. Police just aren't there, or they don't respond, they don't prosecute the crimes, because these thugs are masked up and they work as a group. They're a gang. Okay. Trainwreck asks, "What is the best way to combat these thugs non-violently? That is, when would people demand action?" Um, the best way is to pay attention to local government. Nobody really had the foresight on the right that you could really, really undermine public safety in the criminal justice system by getting in a ideologically motivated left-wing prosecutor who believes that there's systemic racism in the court system, and therefore to reach the goal of equity, the goal is then to not prosecute crimes because of the disparate outcomes and the demographics. Nobody on the right predicted that all these prosecutors who had successful campaigns, mostly successful campaigns across the US, would get so much money through these political action communities that got money from George Soros. Parents didn't really think of how important it was to pay attention to who's on the school board, for example. So pay close attention to local governance. It matters a lot. It's been very eye-opening to me. Okay. Libertab wrote, "Andy, we love your work in reporting. We have a country to save. Thank you very much for your comments." Tutu Fox wrote, "Tell Andy we appreciate all he does. Even the psychos want to harm him. Thank you." Judith wrote, "Thanks for being a true journalist and standing your ground." Thank you for your comments. I really appreciate these kind words that you all say. I don't take any of it for granted. I have so much gratitude for it. Really, thank you. So, as I wrap up the show, I'm going to share my link tree, which is linktree/Andy Ngo, and it's there. The link is also on my GitHub, by the way, and it's on my social media accounts, but it's where you can see all the links that are associated with me. So it's one place that makes it easy to find all my stuff. It's my official website. If you can support my journalism, please join me on Local's Patreon or Subscribe Star. You can pick how much you want to give. It can be as low as $5 a month on these, or a one-time amount. It doesn't even have to be reoccurring. Other ways you can donate through PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. My usernames on those is at Mr. Andy Ngo. You can read about my ongoing lawsuit against Antifa. You can support me there. Of course, I have my book, Unmasked: Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. That's available for sale. The paperback version came out earlier this year, and the paperback is updated with a new chapter. So please support my work. I need your support to be able to do this work. Thanks so much for tuning in to Weekly Notice this week and sending me your questions and comments. Kind words are greatly appreciated. Continue to leave comments, in the Getter. So after this live stream is over, you can catch me every week on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.